Joe Rogan was trending on Twitter this weekend. Joe Rogan on why he's set to vote for Donald Trump. Democrats have made us all morons by running Joe Biden. Now, that headline's a little misleading. First of all, he said he would rather have Trump in office than Biden. He didn't say he's actually going to go vote for Donald Trump. So you could say that's a distinction without a difference, but I actually do think that there's a little bit of a difference there. If you're saying, hey man, I'd rather have this person than this person, that's different than saying I'm actively going to go and vote for this person. So that's one point. But the other point is, Joe talks about how, and he's made this clear many times now, Biden is in cognitive decline. And Joe thinks it is totally unacceptable and unforgivable that somebody in cognitive decline is being pushed on us and might be the president of the United States. And that's, as far as I can tell, the only thing that Joe is considering. Look at what the response was. This is just one example, but I could give you 1,000 more because he was trending on Twitter, all because people were saying stuff like this. Remember how the Bernie campaign was flaunting the Joe Rogan endorsement? Well, turns out that Joe Rogan would rather Trump over Biden. Considering how close the Bernie campaign was to Rogan, seems important for Bernie, or at least his campaign, to issue a statement. So think about that. They want Bernie to apologize because Biden is so weak that he can't win swing voters. Ultimately, that's what we're talking about here. Joe Rogan, as Michael Brooks says, is very indicative of an actual center of the country. Like, he's a good example of how many people think about politics. That he has thoughts about it and he'll express them, but I think he would fancy himself relatively apolitical and not too involved in that world. And so he's very indicative of a swing voter or an independent who has checked out to some extent but participates, in our system. And this actually proves the case that Bernie was making all along, and the case of Bernie supporters like myself, that Bernie has a unique strength. His strength is among young people, first and foremost, but also among independents and swing voters, and even former Trump supporters in the Rust Belt who know Bernie's, commitment on trade and fighting all the outsourcing deals and support him for that reason. So Bernie is uniquely positioned to do well in a general election. And this is exactly that case laid out in no uncertain terms. You have a very prominent, more independent type political character and swing voter basically saying, like, I just can't support Biden and I would rather have Trump stay in office for another 4 years than have the guy with cognitive decline. So, funny enough, everybody's melting down, but they're just proving the point of Bernie that he made all along, that if you really wanted to win, then, you need somebody who can get the Joe Rogan kind of voters. Because if you don't win the Joe Rogan kind of voters, how are you going to win the election? Now, I am not of the Joe Rogan belief, me personally. I've told you guys this before, but I'll just sit out. I don't know what Joe will actually do, but I wouldn't go as far as to say, I would prefer Trump over Biden. I do think that goes too far, and I do think that kind of overlooks a lot of the very, very real damage that Trump has done in his time in office and just how bad he's been. So I wouldn't agree with Joe Rogan, but what I will say is the Democrats have now put us in a position where we have no real good response to Joe, because the thing that he's concerned about the most is true. That thing he's concerned about the most is Biden's cognitive ability. I guess you could say, well, Trump also has some sort of cognitive decline. There might be some degree of truth to that, but I don't think it's as severe as Biden's. So you've now put people in a position where I don't think there's a convincing response to Joe Rogan. The best you could do, the best you could say is, what about the Supreme Court? And what about climate change and the Paris Climate Agreement? That's really the best I got that I could say to him. And I guess you could list off Trump's, all of his horrendous policies, like, for example, the 2017 Republican tax cut, which gave 83% of the benefits to the top 1%, the deregulation of the marketplace, the assassination of the Iranian commander, which sparked an international crisis, the increasing of drone strikes by 432%. The list goes on and on of all the things that Trump has done. The firing of the pandemic experts, and then we had a frickin' pandemic. Like, I could list off 1,000,001 things that Trump did that are bad, but, I think the most I could effectively convince somebody is to, if they were leaning in Trump's direction, I could convince them to maybe sit out. But I don't have a good, positive, proactive case to make for Biden, particularly because, he puts his middle finger up to me in every issue I care about deeply. I have zero confidence I know he won't do Medicare for all, but even on other issues where would be a ray of hope, I have zero confidence in him. Like, fighting for a living wage. I don't think he's going to do anything on a living wage front, or free college, or a Green New Deal, or legalizing marijuana. Is the author of the crime bill. He wanted to escalate the war on drugs, and he did for most of his career. So my point is, I have no positive case for Biden other than saying, hey, the courts are really important, and Paris Climate Agreement is really important. That's the most proactive case I can make for Biden. Everything else I say is just anti-Trump, which, again, those things are real as a heart attack, but I'm only convinced in my ability to convince people to not vote for Trump. Not, hey, don't vote for Trump and also vote for Biden. So it's, this is the position they put us in. And, by and large, when you look at the numbers, it's mostly the older boomer liberals who are drunk on MSNBC and CNN. Those are the people who really turned out in this election and gave Biden the advantage. So it'll be interesting to see how the general election unfolds. Right now I'm 50-50 as to what will happen because we have a pandemic and because we have a market crash, so all bets are off, really. But this is how a lot of voters feel. What Joe Rogan just said there about Joe Biden, this is how a lot of voters feel. Somehow we've fallen further from 2016. 2016 was terrible because it was, a neoliberal corporatist representative of the status quo and the establishment versus a totally Looney Tunes narcissist reality star buffoon. Like, those were the options in 2016. Now we have that same reality star buffoon up against somebody that is very similar politics to Hillary Clinton, except he also has severe cognitive decline. Really doesn't get any worse than this. And I hate to tell the Biden supporters, but you are not going to get anywhere with shaming. Shaming Bernie to apologize because his opponent is uniquely weak, that's not going to work. And shaming people like Rogan is not going to work either, because he'll just tell you to piss off. So the voter outreach of the Biden people is beyond abysmal. And you're going to need a good voter outreach and good strong arguments to convince people who are either those independents and swing voters or the left. Because the left, people like me, are like, I can't do it, man. I feel physically ill when I think about participating in this clown show of an election. So this is where we are. None of the lessons of 2016 were learned. And you see the Biden people doing exactly the same thing that the Hillary people did in 2016.